have drains to see and pictures of fish and reminders and things.
Right.
I think one of the answers is to get the kids early on this, like they've told us to stop washing our cars on the driveway, like they told us years ago to put our seatbelts on. Tell the kids that, exactly the consequences of putting your cigarette butts down the drain. And the other thing that makes me a bit sad is that some of this is because we've made smokers so like pariahs that they don't dare put their cigarette butts in the ashtray of their cars.
Well, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. Someone says here, actually, good grief, what next? What about banning chewing gum instead? Take a look at the footpaths. Raj, that's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, but this point about cigarette smokers and kind of almost being forced out is really interesting. It's an unintended consequence. And maybe it kind of, them not piling up in a butt kind of, and you drop it in a gutter and you don't need to keep count of how many you've had. And
yeah, good point.
And you lose them to the sea.
Yeah. Just on a final note, now, toward the end of last year, it seemed we were being inundated from all sides by debates about free speech, whether it was Don Brash speaking or not speaking, Mass University, Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern, and the debate about whether they should be allowed in the country to speak. Complex issue. So interesting to read in Stuff today that an Australian blogger named Taylor Winterstein is coming to speak in Auckland later this year, because Miss Winterstein is well known as self-described ex-vaxxer who claims vaccination industry is full of lies, manipulation and BS. The editorial is for her $200 4-hour workshop. Says it's completely referenced and thorough, showcasing the latest science and medical literature. She is an anti-vaxxer. Poor timing, Alexa, you'd have to say, given the measles outbreak in Canterbury, but should we let her in?
We should let her land in Canterbury, inject her with a live measles virus and see what happens. All these people make me so angry. As far as I'm concerned, they're worse than the free speeches and, because free speeches are kind of saying what they believe in, even though it's unpalatable. But anti-vaxxers are killing people, eventually. And people pick up on their message, and people who are confused about, who don't want to put a needle in their baby, pick up on it, and they make me so cross. No, I wouldn't let her in.
Getting heated here in the Auckland newsroom, Raj. What's your take on this issue?
No, and I agree with Alexia. I mean, this connects to the super fans of Michael Jackson, to people for whom evidence changes nothing. And I do think that has to form the outer boundaries of free speech. I mean, just as we wouldn't have a Holocaust denier in the country who says, all of the evidence doesn't mean anything to me, or we wouldn't have someone who still refuses to, accept the equal and full humanity of different human beings. If there is an area where the overwhelming latest scientific consensus that people who are not funded by any interest groups and have devoted years to the subject, this is their consensus, and you still ignore their evidence, and your views, as Alexia said, cause lasting harm because others might not vaccinate their children from listening to you, I do think there's a case for the public harm.
Very, very interesting and well said, both of you. And meanwhile, we're going out with your theme tune, Raj. How about that?
Oh, True Detective.
Does that mean he won?
You have been a wonderful panel. Extraordinary response by text and tweet this afternoon. Alexi Russell, Raj Chakraborty, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you to Emil. Checkpoint next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, Greens co-leader James Shaw is black and blue after being punched on the way to work. Are MPs just a little too accessible? Should parents who refuse to immunise their children pay more tax? What about docking benefits too? Dr Lance O'Sullivan on how he'd get vaccination rates up. We visit Hastings' lucky little lotto shop, $11 million worth of lucky. Truant or trying to save the planet, secondary principals refuse to endorse tomorrow's climate strike. Winston Peters rides shotgun for Shane Jones over his controversial comments about the Serious Fraud Office. And Facebook and Instagram crashed this morning, the biggest outage in their history. Did you get withdrawals? RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leao tawa tēnei. Civil Defence is apologising for issuing a false alert about a major earthquake an hour ago. Just before 4 o'clock, it sent out a notification to say it was assessing the tsunami risk for New Zealand from a 6.6 quake south of the Kermadec Islands. However, a few minutes later, after RNZ News had broadcast the message, it deleted the alert, saying it was an old one and there was no current event. The Civil Defence Director, Sarah Stewart-Black, says it's trying to work out what went wrong.
We want to make sure that this doesn't happen again. This wasn't a tsunami notification and it didn't involve any instructions to evacuate, but I apologise for any confusion or alarm the message may have created by being sent out.
Sarah Stewart-Black of Civil Defence. A 47-year-old man has been charged with attacking the Cabinet Minister and Green Party co-leader James Shaw. He will appear in the Wellington District Court tomorrow, charged with injuring with intent to injure. Mr Shaw suffered a black eye, a bloody nose and facial lacerations when he was attacked in the street on his way to work at Parliament this morning. RNZ understands the assailant jumped out of a van, shouting comments aimed at Mr Shaw personally. The Prime Minister says it's a shocking thing to happen, but she hopes it won't affect politicians' accessibility to the public.
From time to time, we do see challenges, we do see and have reason for concern. Of course, I think we would still want to find a way that we can maintain security, but still be accessible. But again, this is a pretty jarring thing to happen.
Jacinda Ardern says James Shaw is being pretty stoic about it. The Secondary Principals Association is refusing to endorse tomorrow's student-led climate change strike. Thousands of students throughout the country are expected to miss school in order to take part in the school strike for climate action. The association's president, Michael Williams, says principals should not support the action because there are health and safety risks.
If the parents think we've endorsed it, they could well believe that we think it's going to be okay and we've checked it out and the kids will be safe. But there are a whole pile of issues around the children getting there, when they're there, who's supervising, what will happen, and we have no control over that.
Michael Williams says students are likely to be marked as truant if they attend the protest. Facebook is coming out of the worst outage in its history. Many of its services were inaccessible for hours today, and apps it owns like Instagram and WhatsApp Messenger were also affected. The BBC's David Lee reports.
All in all, this is an enormous collapse of many Facebook services. And for some of those looking at this as a wide situation, they're saying this really underlines the amount of internet, if you like, that Facebook is in control of. And so when there is a problem with Facebook, that problem is pretty great. This has been a significant day for them, and it's been having a significant impact on many users all over the world.
Dave Lee reporting. The police still don't know if the killing of a 26-year-old man in Mangere was random or targeted. Arthur Brown died after being shot while waiting for a friend near shops early on Sunday morning. Detective Inspector Tofilau Fa'availua says they're looking for at least 3 people in connection with the attack.
Mr. Brown was waiting for a friend to pick him up when 3 offenders have approached him on foot. He's been shot twice before the offenders have cowardly run away from the scene. It's a senseless act of violence. It's left a newborn baby without a father.
Tofilau Fa'availua says the police have CCTV footage of the offenders. The Canterbury District Health Board says it's encouraging that no new measles cases have been confirmed in the past day, and the number remains at 28. The Medical Officer of Health, Ramon Pink, says there have been challenges getting vaccines to practices, but the lack of new cases is a positive sign.
It means that the strategies that we do have in place in vaccinating our target population and communications to the public about the situation is certainly helping us to begin to arrest this outbreak.
Ramon Pink. An extra 18,000 vaccine doses have been sent to the region to top up dwindling supplies, and GPs are prioritising unvaccinated children. Gisborne's long-serving mayor will step down at the local body elections in October after 18 years in the job. Meng Foon, who's 59, was elected to the council in 1995 and successfully ran for mayor in 2001. He says that after 24 years, he's quitting politics to devote more time to his family.
family, his new glamping business and his family's charitable trust.
I've had a great journey, and I think, for me, I've got grandchildren. I'm getting close to 60. I still got a lot of energy for some more doors to open, and so I am retiring.
As the country's only mayor fluent in te reo, Mr Foon says he's proudest of his engagement with Māori communities during his tenure, and he hopes that will continue. It's 5:05. World Rugby's bid to establish a new Nations League is expected to hit a brick wall at a meeting in Dublin tonight. Its chairman, Bill Beaumont, will host the summit, which is being attended by representatives of all Tier 1 countries, plus Fiji and Japan, as well as the International Players Union. But as sports editor Stephen Hewson reports, there's extensive opposition to the proposed annual tournament.
The challenge World Rugby head Bill Beaumont faces is convincing the Six Nations unions to abandon Project Light, whereby TV rights from the Championship and the Autumn Tests are pulled, driving up revenue. The new plan also involves introducing promotion and relegation to the tournament. Cash-strapped New Zealand, Australia and South Africa can't compete with wages offered by French and English clubs and support World Rugby's new vision. All Tier 1 nations must vote in favour of the plan for it to go ahead, but that's highly unlikely, with the Six Nations union set to default to financial self-interest. This is Stephen Hewson.
Meanwhile, All Blacks lock and Crusaders skipper Sam Whitelock will make his first Super Rugby appearance of the season. He's been named in the Crusaders' starting lineup for their Southern Derby against the Highlanders in Dunedin on Saturday night. Liverpool have become the fourth English team to qualify for the quarterfinals of the European Football's Champions League. They beat Bayern Munich 3-1 in Germany after the first leg ended goalless, and joined Manchester City, Manchester United and Tottenham in the last 8. Barcelona also qualified by beating Lyon 5-1. That's the news.
Disruption.
It's a bit like somebody ringing the doorbell and then running away hundreds of thousands of times a second.
Contradiction.
We suffer from low youth voter turnout, and now we're complaining about students wanting to get involved in their democracy.
Confusion.
There are some parliamentarians who aren't quite clear on what is happening here, so don't feel bad that you need this explaining.
We'll get to the bottom of it. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy and Espina, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, insurance woes. How bad will IAG's pullback from the Wellington market be? And after 10, War Zone doctor David Knott, who says targeting frontline doctors is becoming a weapon. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula. Fine spells, isolated afternoon showers. Bay of Plenty and Waikato to Manawatu, including the central high country. A few showers, mainly about the ranges, some heavy and possibly thundery inland today. For Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Horowhenua to Wellington. Cloudy periods, a few afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Bulla and Westland, occasional rain in Bulla, spreading south late this afternoon. Heavy rain in Westland tomorrow, especially about the ranges. For Nelson and Marlborough, cloudy periods and a few spots of rain. Canterbury and eastern Otago, cloudy with patchy drizzle in North Otago, occasional rain developing north of Ashburton this evening, spreading south tomorrow, persistent for a time. For Fiordland, Southland and the remainder of Otago, long fine spells, however rain late tomorrow in Otago. At the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, drizzle returning this evening. It's coming up to 9 minutes past 5 and you're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The Green Party co-leader James Shaw is nursing a black eye and lacerations to his face after an attack in Wellington today that's prompted fears over the security of our MPs. RNZ understands a man jumped out of a van near the Botanical Gardens shortly after 7:30 this morning, shouting political comments aimed at the Climate Change Minister personally. Questions are now being raised as to whether politicians are too accessible in this country and whether the political landscape in New Zealand is changing for the worse. Here's political reporter Gia Garrick.
Even an assault didn't deter James Shaw from getting to Parliament this morning. He talked to paramedics and the police at the scene outside the entrance to the Botanical Gardens on Glenmore Street before heading on to work to attend his usual Environment Cabinet Committee meeting. The Agriculture Minister, Damien O'Connor, commended him for the bravado.
I have to give full marks to James. He turned up at Cab Committee with a black eye and bleeding nose, so it's a true commitment to the job, and I hope he comes right quick.
It wasn't until later he checked himself into hospital for a proper checkup. He responded to texts asking if he was okay, saying it looked worse than it was. And Mr Shaw clearly told the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, the same thing.
While he, of course, is, pretty stoic, it is a pretty shocking thing to happen. I think that, we all appreciate and I think probably celebrate the accessibility of our politicians in New Zealand. I think that's obviously something that we want to be able to maintain, but I don't think we can take it for granted either.
There's hope from many, including the Finance Minister Grant Robertson, that politics isn't taking an ugly turn.
One of the things that is really great about New Zealand is the access that people have to politicians and the fact that this is, a country where we don't have the big distance between politicians and people and so on. I certainly hope we can continue that.
Up until now, most politicians in New Zealand have felt relatively free and safe to go about their daily lives in public without security or taking extra safety precautions. The Police Minister, Stuart Nash, says it would be a sad day if every Cabinet Minister had to be accompanied by a security detail.
I would hate to think that we have entered an era where politicians need to be protected like that.
Politicians across the political spectrum united in condemning the attack, calling it horrific and unwarranted. Mr Shaw's climate change counterpart, the National MP Todd Muller, says it's not reflective of the New Zealand he knows.
I don't think one man's punch defines a nation's political discourse. It's far from that in this country and in this parliament. Indeed, in climate change, we're working hard to develop a bipartisan outcome.
And other MPs have shared stories of times they've felt threatened in public, like the former Minister, Paula Bennett.
Yeah, I have in the past. Probably about 3 occasions come to mind where I felt that I could be physically hurt and have had to call the police and have assistance for it.
When you were Minister?
Yes, it was.
The Green Party co-leader Marama Davidson says she's just grateful for the 2 members of the public who jumped in to help James Shaw after he'd been hit. They called an ambulance and got in touch with the police.
This is also what I love about New Zealand, is that people will jump in and help, and that's what New Zealand has always been about.
Ms Davidson was keeping to the positives and says she hopes this was just a one-off random attack. The police have arrested and charged a 47-year-old man with injuring with intent to injure. He'll appear in the Wellington District Court tomorrow. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Gia Garrick.
And our political editor, Jane Patterson, joins us now from Parliament. Hi, Jane. What does this mean for politicians generally? Do we think that security will be beefed up?
Well, politicians here were very alarmed to hear what happened to James Shaw. Of course, they were concerned about him personally, but it also really brought it home to them, the situation for MPs. And as you heard there in Gia's piece, most MPs we've talked to today like being out and about in their communities. They like the fact that they can take their kids to sports or go to the supermarket, and they're worried that that may have to be curtailed if these incidents really increase more. And they've also talked about, their spouses and partners being concerned and starting to ask questions about, well, you have to keep yourself safe, or actually is it worth the job? So a lot of this kind of discussion coming around today. Now, the Prime Minister has DPS, Diplomatic Protection Service officers with her wherever she is out and about, which is customary for all Prime Ministers. In terms of the opposition leader, he can have security staff if and when needed, as can any MP if they think that their security is threatened. But again, MPs said that they don't want to have a situation where they're surrounded by a group of officers or security when they're out and about in their communities, as that's very much part of their job as an MP. But certainly this incident today has given them all a pause for thought.
So when you talk about security on a needs basis, who makes that decision? Is it the MP or the Minister who says, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable, can I have some security? Who ultimately makes that decision?
So what we've heard in the past when things have happened, and look, I must say too that threats and death threats are incredibly common. Again, MPs recounting times when they've felt unsafe or when they've felt that they've had to refer situations to the police. So what I understand is really it's the police that makes those decisions, and that would be in consultation with the ministerial staff and of course parliamentary security here at Parliament. So when a threat is received, it's basically assessed to see how serious it is, and police do take this very seriously. A number of MPs telling us that police have become involved in times in the past when there have been very physical and violent threats against them. So it really it has made primarily by the police. I mean, it's also their responsibility to protect MPs, particularly the DPS. But another interesting aspect of this that's been raised today is the role of social media in kind of inciting violence and inciting hatred, not just against MPs, of course, but they certainly are a flashpoint for it. So discussion here today about people getting onto social media and how that contributes to some of this attitude towards MPs and how that can be curtailed. Now, no one has the answers to that, but they're the sorts of things that have been discussed here at Parliament as I said, everyone's responded to the attack against James Shaw.
Yeah, really interesting stuff, Jane. Thank you. And social media also allows you to track people's movements as well. That is Jane Patterson, our political editor, joining us from Parliament there to discuss what happened, the assault on James Shaw. Canterbury GPs are having to turn patients away who aren't a priority for new supplies of the measles vaccine as the region's outbreak spreads to Dunedin. Authorities are scrambling to trace nearly 50 people who've been in contact with 2 people who've contracted measles in Dunedin. There are 2 separate cases in Auckland that aren't believed to be linked. The number of confirmed cases in Canterbury remains at 28. But as our health correspondent Karen Brown reports, authorities across the rest of the country are on high alert.
Canterbury GPs were busy today delivering long-awaited supplies of the MMR vaccine to the top priority group in the region. That's those aged from 12 months to 13 years old, followed by others deemed most at risk. GP Phil Schroeder of the Canterbury Primary Response Group spoke of relief once most of an extra 18,000 doses of vaccine arrived.
There was a sigh of relief when vaccine appeared at the general practices yesterday, and some are still getting there this morning as well. But we are now able to vaccinate as per the new priorities.
It's been a massive effort by Canterbury GPs, who are also now having to turn people away unless they are in the target 12 months to 3-year age group. Dr Schroeder accepts it's action that needed to be taken.
It's awkward and it's difficult, but I think folk are understanding that this is part of the bigger picture, that we must protect those that are most vulnerable and try and get the best bang for buck.
In Dunedin, public health experts scrambled to trace 45 people who had been in contact with 2 confirmed cases of measles there. They were a student who went from Christchurch to Dunedin for university and a person in their 30s who went from Christchurch to visit family in Dunedin. A local medical officer of health, Marion Poor, says those at risk have been asked to stay at home.
If they are at risk, for example, they have not been vaccinated at all or have not had 2 measles vaccinations, then we're advising them that they may have been at risk and asking them to stay at home.
She says 18 people, mainly children, are in isolation currently for those reasons. The Canterbury outbreak sparked a call for Crusaders rugby fans to stay away from this weekend's Super Rugby clash against the Highlanders in Dunedin if they feel unwell. The Crusaders captain, Sam Whitelock, says he's fully immunised and anyone else with concerns should get checked out.
I'm not a doctor, I don't pretend to be one, so I'll probably give your doctor a ring and find out what they recommend for myself. You know, that's what I do, but I'm sure everyone's trying to do the right thing to make sure it doesn't go any further.
The Highlanders head coach, Aaron Major, cannot imagine that a lack of immunity would stop any of his players from the game.
Not that I'm aware of. I can go and get the doctor. He's probably, he'd actually like to be in front of the camera, so if you'd like to talk to him, you're more than welcome.
Meanwhile, in Auckland, with 2 confirmed measles cases not linked to Canterbury's, there's more concern.
I think I would probably be hesitant to go to large gatherings at the moment until it's all passed over.
It's a little bit worrying, obviously we know because it's so contagious, but we are all vaccinated in the family and our baby is as well, so hopefully we'll be okay, but still probably keep away as much as we can.
Checks with most of the country's 20 DHBs to date revealed no further confirmed cases of measles so far from Canterbury or elsewhere. But the Director of Public Health at the Health Ministry, Carolyn McElnay, says they're watching it closely.
It's something that we want to keep a very close eye on, and is one of the reasons why the public health team in Canterbury are following up the cases and the contacts and why they're implementing a vaccination programme. We want to make sure it doesn't happen, so that's why all the efforts are going into containing the outbreak in Christchurch.
People born after 1969 are considered susceptible because of past immunisation gaps. They and all others are urged to check and get fully immunised. Mo te hotaka o te ahi, ko Karen Brown aho.
In breaking news, police in the Armed Offenders Squad are responding to an event in Thornton near Whakatane following reports of a man in the area, possibly with a firearm. Police said in a statement there have been no injuries, but there is currently no access to East Bank Road. It is 19 after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're always keen to hear from you, so you can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Civil Defence is trying to figure out how it issued a false alert about a major earthquake this afternoon. Just before 4 o'clock, it sent out a notification to say it was assessing the tsunami risk for New Zealand after a 6.6 magnitude quake recorded south of the Kermadec Islands. However, a few minutes later, after RNZ had broadcast the message, it deleted the tweet and said it was an old earthquake notification from a week ago. The Civil Defence Director, Sarah Stewart-Black, told our reporter Jonathan Mitchell they'll now investigate to make sure it doesn't happen again.
The earthquake was from a week ago, and I can confirm there is no current earthquake event and there's no need for concern. I understand that the message was rescinded within a few minutes.
But how did it happen to begin with?
Well, we're trying to work out what exactly occurred and why a duplicate message of an old event was sent out. We want to make sure that this doesn't happen again. This wasn't a tsunami notification and it didn't involve any instructions to evacuate, but I apologise for any confusion or alarm the message may have created by being sent out. We'll be looking into it and taking any corrective action because it's important that people can have confidence in these notifications.
Is this something you might resign over?
No, it's not.
What sort of review? How is that going to work and how will you make sure it doesn't happen again?
So, look, I'm certainly sharing in a huge amount of frustration from people who may have seen this message, and where there is a genuine emergency or event that has occurred, notifications, of course, will be issued. Our challenge is to make sure that we have staff that are trained and have the systems to support them, and our focus is going to be trying to understand what exactly happened in this situation. I understand that our training site was being used. However, this is a message that got sent out from a former earthquake that occurred, and we're just trying to understand what's gone on in the system, that from a training side of the site, how was it picked up and distributed a message out to the public. So we'll be looking at that from a technology point of view about whether there is something in the system that hasn't operated in the way that it should, or whether this is something that's occurred for some other reason, but we'll be wanting to make sure that we fix that straight away and can ensure that the public understand that this won't happen again.
Well, so what do you mean by training? Were you training people with using the website?
Yes, that's correct. So we have a training site that is dedicated, not live, where it means that we can keep staff trained in how to use the system so that when a real situation occurs, we are able to have staff that are able to send out those notifications as soon as we can. So the training site was being used today. What is unclear is how we had a message issued from that training site to the live environment, and that's what we're unsure of. So all of our usual protocols have been followed, but it is unclear what has occurred for it to have been publicly disseminated.
So it was a message sent from the training site that got live?
Yes, and that's what we're unsure about. So again, can I please apologise to all of your listeners for the error message going out and for any alarm or concern that may have created, and we will be working through very quickly about what has occurred in order to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
And that was Sarah Stewart-Black from Civil Defence, and she was speaking with Jonathan Mitchell there. It's been an astounding day in British politics. Brexit has delivered a lot of drama over the past 2 years, but even seasoned British commentators say they have never seen anything like what happened in the Commons today. As the clock ticks down to a supposed Brexit on March 29th, the fractures in Theresa May's Conservative Party are becoming more obvious. Earlier today, MPs took two vital votes. They voted to reject leaving leaving the EU without a withdrawal agreement, and they then rejected a no-deal Brexit under any circumstances on any date. Prime Minister Theresa May endured yet another day of humiliation, and she's now warned MPs, back her deal or risk losing Brexit altogether. The BBC's political editor Laura Koonsberg is at Westminster and filed this report.
The ayes to the right, 321. The noes to the left, 278.
Parliament won, the Prime Minister lost. MPs clearly said we should never leave the EU without a deal. But what now?
The House has today provided a clear majority against leaving without a deal. However, I will repeat what I have said before.
Can she really say nothing has changed?
The legal default in UK and EU law remains that the UK will leave the EU without a deal unless something else is agreed.
Struggling to be heard, not just because of her failing voice.
The House has to understand and accept that if it is not willing to support a deal in the coming days, and as it is not willing to support leaving without a deal on the 29th of March, then it is suggesting that there will need to be a much longer extension to Article 50. The House needs to face up to the consequences of the decisions it has taken.
Through the noise, understand the Prime Minister's not ditching her deal. Instead, she's warning MPs, vote for it soon, or else Brexit faces a long delay.
In the last 24 hours, Parliament has decisively rejected both her deal and no deal. While an extension of Article 50 is now inevitable, the responsibility of that extension lies solely and squarely at the Prime Minister's door. Parliament must now take control of the situation.
The astonishing thing about tonight's defeat for Number 10, it only happened because some ministers who sat around the same table this morning ignored the Prime Minister's instructions and abstained. A total breakdown in discipline.
I'm not resigning because I support the Prime Minister in her course of action. Her course of action is to leave with a deal in an orderly Brexit. But I'm very clear that I don't support a no-deal Brexit, and I've made that clear on numerous occasions.
There's already an angry pushback against ministers who didn't vote with the government, even though their allies insist they were told they could.
Any minister who has defied the whip should consider their position and resign from government.
A junior minister quit the front bench to vote against the party line. Within days, Theresa May will ask MPs to choose her deal or delay. But could tonight's fiasco be for nothing?
I'll tell the government now that when meaningful vote 3 comes back, I will see to it that we honour what we owe to them to keep voting this down, however many times it's brought back, whatever pressure we're put under, and come what may, please don't do it. Go back to the EU and say it won't pass.
But for some time, ministers have privately hoped the threat of slamming the brakes on Brexit could push and shove Parliament towards backing a deal they hate.
Parliament has done this to us. The weakness, frankly, of certain ministers has done this to us. The weakness of the Labour Party has done this to us. And I tonight am angry and bewildered at having a gun to my head to vote for a wretched deal or not to leave.
Number 10 believes the EU when they say the deal as it stands really is it.
Nous avons négocié pendant 1 an et demi avec le gouvernement de Theresa May.
The chief negotiator brandishing the treaty today. What he said is the only one. Within a few days, that deal, the Prime Minister's deal, will be back in front of Parliament for another verdict. Theresa May pursuing a strategy by bizarre design or political accident. Losing, then losing, and losing again, with the hope, finally, to win.
Laura Koonsberg with that report. Boeing has grounded its entire global fleet of 737 MAX aircraft after investigators uncovered new evidence at the scene of the fatal Ethiopian Airlines crash. The US plane maker says it will suspend all 371 of the aircraft. The US Federal Aviation Administration says fresh evidence as well as newly refined satellite data prompted the decision to temporarily ban the jets from the skies. The BBC's Nick Bryant reports.
Today, the crash site in Ethiopia became a place of multinational mourning. Passengers and crew from 35 countries were killed when the plane plunged into this field on Sunday, just 6 minutes after takeoff. North America had been one of the few places the Boeing 737 MAX was still allowed to fly. The aviation authority here had resisted demands to follow safety regulators in more than 40 countries by grounding the plane. But tonight at the White House, Donald Trump announced a change of mind.
We're going to be issuing an emergency order of prohibition to ground all flights of the 737 MAX 8 and the 737 MAX 9. The safety of the American people and all people is our paramount concern.
Another Boeing 737 MAX crashed in similar circumstances last October off Indonesia, killing 189 people. Canada said there was new evidence suggesting a possible link between the two crashes as it announced its own grounding.
This is new information that we received and analyzed this morning, comes from validated satellite tracking data suggesting a possible, although unproven, similarity in the flight profile of the Lion Air aircraft.
It was after analysing new evidence collected at the crash site today that the US Federal Aviation Administration made its decision. It found very close similarities between the two crashes. The groundings have affected David and his daughter Maddie, who are supposed to fly from New York to Edinburgh tonight.
I think that it's definitely a smart decision to ground the planes. It's better safe than sorry when it comes to dangers in the air, but I do think that they should notify their customers when their flights are being cancelled and helping them reschedule for another time.
Boeing said it continues to have full confidence in the safety of the plane, but out of an abundance of caution is recommending the temporary grounding of the entire global fleet.
And that was Nick Bryant reporting. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, principals tell students they can't guarantee their safety tomorrow if they go on the climate strike. Dr Lance O'Sullivan on how he would force parents to immunise their kids, and forced Facebook withdrawal after the network experiences the biggest outage in its history. Did you actually miss it? Let us know. We would love your feedback. Get in touch. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an old-fashioned email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And here's Susanna Leotawa with the headlines.
A 47-year-old man has been charged with attacking the Cabinet Minister and Green Party co-leader James Shaw. He will appear in the Wellington District Court tomorrow, charged with injuring with intent to injure. Mr Shaw suffered facial injuries when he was attacked in the street on his way to work at Parliament this morning. Civil Defence is apologising for issuing a false alert about a major earthquake this afternoon. Just before 4 o'clock, it sent out an alert saying it was assessing the tsunami risk for New Zealand from a 6.6 quake south of the Kermadec Islands. However, a few minutes later it deleted the alert, saying it was an old one and there was no current event. Armed police have this afternoon been responding to reports of a man possibly with a firearm in a small Bay of Plenty town. The police say they were called to a property in Thornton near Whakatane this afternoon. The police still don't know if the killing of a 26-year-old man in Mangere was random or targeted. Arthur Brown was shot dead while waiting for a friend near shops early on Sunday morning. Detectives have described the attack on the father of a newborn baby as a cowardly ambush. Housing for up to 300 families, including 40 units for vulnerable homeless people, are planned for central Wellington in a partnership between Housing New Zealand and the City Council. Wellington Mayor Justin Lester says, subject to public consultation, the new Mount Cook development on the site of the old Arlington apartments will be a mix of high-quality public and affordable housing. He says a development on this scale will make a significant difference to the homelessness in the capital. The Secondary Principals Association is refusing to endorse tomorrow's student-led climate change strike and says students are likely to be marked as truant if they attend. Thousands of students throughout the country are expected to miss school in order to take part in the school's strike for climate action. The principals group says it does not support the action because there are health and safety risks. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Let's go to business now. Nona Peltier is in the studio. Nona, so 4 of the country's biggest companies and carbon emitters are getting together to buy and grow forests. Should we have a go at guessing those 4 companies?
Well, yeah, let's do it. Okay,
you tell us.
I won't keep you guessing. I'll tell you. It's Genesis.
Right.
And that's a power retailer.
Yep.
It's also Genesis Contact is another one. It's the biggest one. They use they have coal-fired generators,
right? So 2 power companies
and gas generators rather. And we also have Air New Zealand, which is a fuel user, and obviously Z Energy, which supplies fuel.
Okay.
So those 4 are going to get together. They've set up a company called Dryland Carbon, and what it is basically is they're going to go around buying up or planting on marginal land. So this is land that can't be used for farming or other purposes. And they're going to plant it up with trees which are going to be ones that would take up a lot of carbon as to offset their use. So as time goes by, the price of carbon will be offset with the trees that they plant. And it complements the government's plan to plant about 1 billion trees.
And they're going to fund all of that themselves?
Yeah, they're going to do the whole thing themselves. So there is funding available, but these guys don't need it. They've got lots of money.
All right, there's been an independent report into the dairy sector. Now, interestingly, this has shown that Fonterra has one of the worst returns on investment in the industry. What exactly is it saying about them?
Yeah, it's interesting. So this is a report that looks at the whole of the picture, and they're saying that basically Fonterra has offered, a really poor return on investment for shareholders, and that would be, people who invested in the fund, which is people that aren't farmers, as well as farmers. So over the past 5 years, their return on capital has been 6%. And when you look at over the market as a whole, it's less than a third of the best performer, and that's in the dairy sector. So they've, big company with a poor return. It's not great news, but not also very surprising. Fonterra, we know, made a loss in their last full year result. They've said that they've underperformed. They've got a new executive team in place, and they are promising to turn things around. The report suggests that their plans to turn things around are right on target. So in that sense, the report was positive for Fonterra. It said, it pointed to the mistakes it's made in the past and saying, hey, better times ahead potentially for that company.
No pressure on the new guy then.
No pressure at all. In fact, they're going to be reporting their half-year result next Wednesday.
So what about the rest of the market?
Yeah, okay, so we ended up 0.5%, which is pretty good because the rest of the market is looking fairly sluggish and just biding their time, wondering what's going on with Brexit and all the other stuff that's happening. So we ended up 0.5%, 48 points up to 9,436. So we outperformed the region. I mean, the ASX was flat, and in some markets it was actually down. Our dollar is holding steady as well at 68.4 US cents, and still strong against that Australian dollar at 96.8 and 51.6 pence. Now, the pence improved with the no Brexit deal, the bizarre.
The swings and roundabouts of Brexit. Yeah.
At the moment, it's doing better. So there you go.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with Business. It has been a really bad day for Facebook. Reports out of New York say a criminal investigation's been opened looking at data deals Facebook struck with some of the world's largest technology companies and intensifying scrutiny of its business practices. But possibly even worse, Facebook and Instagram have been down for most of the day for millions of users around the globe, one of its worst outages in its history. The BBC's Dave Lee is in San Francisco. He says the New York investigation's been added to a pile of problems Facebook's been facing, but the major issue today has been the crash of the platforms.
Tonight on Night's Difference. An absolutely enormous outage has occurred, with the biggest to our mind since 2008. And given the size of the site in 2008, which was a mere 150 million, I think we can describe this one that's happening at the moment as the most severe that it's ever had, because the site has now around 2.5 billion users on it. And what's been affected is the Facebook app itself. People have been unable to post, unable to see their notifications. Instagram, the image sharing app, that's been disrupted. disrupted. WhatsApp, the messaging app that Facebook has been disrupted. This has been a significant day for them, and it's been having a significant impact on many, many users all over the world, which is where this is affecting. It's a global problem that Facebook's had. They don't know, or at least they haven't told us what happened. The one thing they have said is that they're aware of it and they're looking to resolve it. And they've also dismissed rumours that it was the victim of a particular type of cyber attack, what's known as distributed denial of service attack. That's a technique that hackers can sometimes use to overwhelm services with a lot of traffic to make them fall over, i.e. be, not able to handle that kind of traffic. Facebook says that hasn't happened in this case, but it hasn't gone any further. It hasn't told us what it does think has happened, if indeed it knows at this point.
Well, I'm really interested to know if you did miss Facebook. We've had a bit of feedback on that already. Pam has got in touch to say, yeah, she missed it. She plays Scrabble online, which uses a Facebook app, and she couldn't get into it to take her turn. Siona in Nelson wasn't that worried though, saying, I have deliberately removed Facebook from my phone so that I have to make an appointment with myself first thing in the morning or more often in the evening and look at it on my laptop because it was such a daytime distraction. Let us know your thoughts. Text 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. New Zealand First leader Winston Peters has weighed in support of comments by his MP Shane Jones about the Serious Fraud Office investigation into National Party donations. During general debate in Parliament, Mr Jones said he would study every single step the SFO takes to ensure it's not a whitewash. The National Party MP Paul Goldsmith said that was an extraordinary statement to make, given the convention that politicians should have no influence on the way law enforcement agencies carry out their business. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Shane Jones has a habit of hitting the headlines, but that hasn't stopped him continuing to make controversial comments. The latest was about the SFO and the National Party investigation during Parliament's general debate yesterday.
Has the Leader of the Opposition yet been interviewed by the Serious Fraud Office? Was the Leader of the Opposition interviewed by the police? More to the point, will he declare to the New Zealand public he has been? And if that is the case, will he stand down?
But that wasn't all he had to say.
I make a prediction. The Serious Fraud Office, once unwisely sicked by that side of the House onto our leader, knows we will study every single step they take to ensure, because it's the National Party, it's not whitewashed. We will ensure that happens. This is incredibly serious, and people may very well, sir, go to jail.
The National Party MP Paul Goldsmith told Parliament later in the same debate that was an outrageous thing to say.
Is he now saying that he is going to guide the SFO, which is an independent statutory body on the police, doing their work? He's going to stand and guide the SFO as they do their work? What an extraordinary thing for a Cabinet Minister to say. I can't believe he said they will ensure that the SFO does it well. Well, that's a very interesting thing to be saying from a Minister of the Crown, and I just want to counsel Mr Jones to be a bit more careful with his language.
On his way into Parliament today, Mr Jones said his remarks had been blown out of proportion.
Paying attention is a key part of being a parliamentarian. I think it's an exaggeration and a very negative connotation that's been put upon my words. I never once said that we're going to influence, we're going to direct. I said we were going to study very carefully.
His party leader and Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters said Mr Jones had not overstepped the line.
No, he did not. All he said was that we'll be watching this inquiry with great legal acuity, as we watch all inquiries. No more, no less.
A spokesperson for the Prime Minister says her expectation is that ministers focus on doing their jobs and not on the National Party. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
The Secondary Principals Association is refusing to endorse tomorrow's climate change march and says students are likely to be marked down as truant if they attend the protest. Principals have told RNZ while the march's message is commendable, they cannot guarantee students' safety if they decide to attend. Brooke Jenner reports.
With thousands of students across the country expected to be taking part in the school strike for climate change, many schools feel like they're in a very tricky position. The principal of Mount Albert Grammar School in Auckland, Patrick Drum, wrote to parents saying he had significant safety concerns for students if they go to the strike. He says the police also share concerns because there has been a lack of information from organisers.
We just haven't had any feedback as a school from organisers around what's planned tomorrow, so it becomes pretty impossible or impractical for the school to endorse students being away.
Mr Drum says tomorrow will be business as usual and he expects children to be at school for a full day of learning. The president of the Secondary Principals Association, Mike Williams, agrees. He's also worried about the students who choose to go.
Young people might be taking public transport and all good, but they might be driving in their friend's car which has no warrant and the driver's not a full licence or any licence. So the risks just go up and up and up.
Mike Williams says principals simply cannot guarantee the safety of the students.
If the parents think we've endorsed it, they could well believe that we think it's going to be okay and we've checked it out and the kids will be safe. But there are a whole pile of issues around the children getting there, when they're there, who's supervising, what will happen, and we have no control over that.
Mike Williams is aware some teachers are taking students to the events as part of organised trips, which he says is fine. But he feels the rally is more about publicity rather than making any real change.
There are lots of ways of putting pressure on. A protest is one that's global. Yep, it's got the newspapers, that's good. What happens next? Or is that just the fish and chips wrappers for next week?
And it is a similar story for the Canterbury West Coast Principals Association. Its president, Phil Holstein, says while it is great the students are engaged, there are better ways to make a point.
The intention is honourable, it is a significant global issue and we're all very conscious of it. It was just we're concerned around the timing.
Mr Holstein is the principal at Burnside High School in Christchurch, where he says his students are taking action at school.
A petition is going to be available for our students to sign here. And the sustainability group are going to be leading that, and the commitment by that group is that they're going to be taking it to the key figures in Christchurch that matter to table it there.
The Secondary Principals Association says the strike should have been better organised and schools should have been involved in the planning. That way more students could have been a part of it, with the backing of their schools. In a statement, the Ministry of Education says there is no one-size-fits-all approach to attendance and truancy. It says while awareness of the environment for students is important, it is up to each Board of Trustees to decide whether going to the climate events is marked as truancy or not. For Checkpoint, Corbrook, Jenna Aho.
So are they bunkers and truants, or are they, well, taking part in a genuine life lesson? Let us know what you think. Police investigating the killing of a Mangere man say he was waiting to meet a friend when he was ambushed and fatally shot over the weekend. Arthur Brown, who was 26, died after being shot twice outside Vine and Farmer Street shortly before 1 o'clock on Sunday morning. The police say Mr Brown was alone when he was approached by 3 men who shot him before fleeing the scene. Detective Inspector Tofilau Fa'availua has told the media today that it was a senseless act of violence that had left a baby to grow up without a father.
I'd also like to call on those who know what happened, or the people, the identity of those responsible, to come forward and talk to us. Even the persons responsible need to man up and hand themselves into police. I don't see any courage or toughness on how this father-to-be was ambushed.
Mr Brown was linked to a street gang, but the police say they don't know whether it was a random or targeted killing.
Our inquiries at the scene have established that there was at least 3 offenders. We're not sure if the offenders have left in a vehicle, and if there was, maybe there was other people in the car. But from our inquiries at the scene, there are at least 3 people who approached Mr Brown on the corner of these shops.
And anyone with information about the killing is urged to contact Crime Stoppers. The number is 0800 555 111. The number again, 0800 555 111. Brazil has been rocked by its worst school mass shooting in years, with 8 people killed at a high school near the city of Sao Paulo. The 2 gunmen, former students at the school, also killed themselves. It's unclear what motivated their attack. The ABC's Nick Grimm reports.
Police emergency workers and frantic parents rushed to the school as news spread. Students had been on their morning break when the gunman entered the school and started shooting. 2 female staff were the first to die. Marcelo Salas is the police commander for Sao Paulo.
They went to the gym next, where they fired on 4 more high school students. At the time, there were only high school students there. Then they went to the language centre, where the students locked themselves in a room with the teacher. And then the shooters committed suicide in the hallway.
Katia Cardoso was one of the students huddled behind a locked door, fearing the gunman would break in and start shooting at any moment. I was afraid, she told the media afterwards. I was really afraid they wanted to grab a student to torture or that they were going to shoot everyone. Students were also confronted by the sight of their fellow students lying dead and badly injured. This 16-year-old girl came upon one victim. When we saw her, we couldn't believe it, she says. Nobody could have anything against her because everyone liked her. The 2 attackers had been hooded and carried guns, knives and crossbows. It's still unclear what motivated their attack. Some reports suggest they were former pupils of the school, now aged in their 20s. Earlier, the pair had shot and killed the owner of a car rental agency and stolen a vehicle. At the local hospital, medical staff were quickly overwhelmed by the rapidly unfolding emergency, as this doctor explains.
A patient arrived with a weapon hidden on his upper right body with active blood loss. We immediately placed him in the emergency room to try to understand what was happening. Then patients began arriving with firearm wounds in their thorax, their backs, their abdomen, their legs. It was very complicated.
Gun crime is common in Brazil. The country has the highest homicide rate in the world, but more unusual are the kind of mass shootings that have become a feature of life in the United States. The nation's new president, Jair Bolsonaro, has tweeted the attack was an immeasurable monstrosity and cowardice. May God comfort everyone's heart. The hard-right leader campaigned on a platform that included promises to crack down on crime, in part by expanding public access to guns. Soon after his inauguration in January, he issued a decree making it easier for people to buy and possess firearms. The political dimensions of this tragedy are already set to be debated as the nation mourns in the days ahead.
Nick Grimm reporting. It is about 9 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Always keen to hear from you. Do get in touch. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's 7 years since the Black Fern Sevens were established, but it's only now that the New Zealand women's rugby side has its own home tournament. New Zealand has secured the rights to host a combined men's and women's World Series tournament for the next 4 years, meaning next year's tournament in Hamilton will see the All Black Sevens and the Black Fern Sevens compete alongside each other. New Zealand Rugby has also confirmed they're in talks with Fiji to try and take the New Zealand leg there at some point between 2020 and 2023. Black Fern Sevens player Niall Williams told sports editor Stephen Hewson that getting a home tournament means a lot to the players.
It's crazy, we've always wanted a home tournament and we got a bit of a taste of it earlier this year, having our own kind of Fast Four series, and the feeling that we got running out, I guess, in front of our home crowd was unreal and amazing. So, yeah, really looking forward to it.
Bit of hard work to get there, though, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been a hard work. This team started in 2012 and it's going to be 2020 when we get our own tournament finally. But in saying that, all these small steps over the last few years that all the previous players and management have been involved in, and New Zealand Rugby really pushing for us to have this home tournament, and I guess our own team performing, you can't go past that. So everyone's worked really hard and it's been a long process, but it's amazing to see that it's coming true.
What was the biggest thing that hit you about getting to play that tournament earlier this year at home?
I guess first and foremost was having family there to support us, running out. And I remember one time being on the field and I looked back when I was kind of standing near the in goal, and I knew my family was in that area, and I looked back and I see my 2 daughters on the fence line watching me, and it was real emotional, and that kind of stands out for me. But also just the amount of support that we have here at home, not just for our men's team, but for our women's team. The crowd was packed too, for our games too, and cheering us on. And when we did the haka at the end, just the mana that we felt in the crowd was, it was amazing.
The decision or the move to look to possibly share the tournament in Fiji, I mean, it's sort of maybe a little bittersweet in the sense that it's not going to be every year at home in Hamilton.
Oh, you can't go past the Fijian supporters. They make those tournaments. It doesn't matter what stop it is, you can guarantee that the biggest support crowd is going to be the Fijians, and they're boisterous, they're loud, they're exciting, beautiful smiles, and if they're not cheering for Fiji, they're usually cheering for us, which is a bonus. So I guess it is bittersweet, but it's amazing to be able to grow the game in their country when they're such a massive part of Sevens.
You get a real sense that it is growing. What tells you that?
Things like the other day I got sent a message on my Instagram page, and a young girl, Makaya, from her, I can't remember what school, but she had done a project and they got told, can you do it on a celebrity? And she done one on myself. And, I don't think of myself as a celebrity, but I do definitely think of our team as a team that's growing and is in the public eye more and more, and people are noticing what we're doing. And so just little things like that, when we go to other countries, people point us out, oh, you're the Blackburn Sevens, and they know individual players. And, take Portia Woodman, for example. She's been named in numerous top 100 influential sports people around the world. So, that comes from our team. And yeah, it's a little bit surreal, to be honest. I didn't think when growing up that I would have someone doing a project necessarily on myself. But as a mother, I love to see that I have young females looking up to myself and our team members. I mean, some of the girls in our team are babies themselves, 18, 19 years old. So I guess being in an international team comes responsibility, and it's great learnings for these young girls to know that, we are in the public eye, and that these younger girls, even younger than themselves, are looking up to them and wanting to be them and be a part of this special thing that we have going on here at the Blackburn Sevens.
Niall Williams talking to our sports editor Stephen Hewson. And just returning to the situation in Thornton near Whakatane, where police and the Armed Defenders Squad were responding to a firearms incident. The police say they were called to a property in Thornton near Whakatane about 2:30 this afternoon, following reports of a man who may have had a gun. More than 100 children had to be evacuated from a nearby primary school. The police say a 23-year-old man has been taken into custody, and East Bank Road is expected to reopen shortly. The country's luckiest lotto shop has struck the jackpot again, although its newest winner remains a mystery. The Unichem Stortford Lodge in Hastings sold an $11 million winning ticket in last night's draw, bringing the total number of First Division winning tickets it's sold to 47. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Anusha Bradley paid a visit to the store to find out what makes it so lucky.
Unichem Stortford Lodge looks just like any New Zealand pharmacy, a two-storey building next to a car park with an ATM just outside. But appearances can be deceiving, although locals like Ann Chester, who buys a weekly lotto ticket here, are in the know.
I wouldn't go anywhere else.
And is there any hope that you might be this $11 million winner?
No. No, I've just won a bonus ticket, that's all.
That's right, the country's luckiest lotto store just got luckier. One of the store's customers is $11 million richer after scooping up last night's lotto loot.
No, next time.
It's been a busy day for the pharmacy's business manager, Carol Ormerod, as hopeful punters stream in to check if they've become instant multi-millionaires.
Oh, just lots of people checking their tickets, commenting on the big winner, hoping it's going to be them, or telling us already it's not them because they've checked their tickets. So, yeah, we're still waiting.
Have you ever served a First Division winner here?
No, I haven't. No. lotto manager would have, though, and yeah, over the years, because we've sold 47 tickets. So I've just been told by lotteries this morning over the years. So
yeah, that makes you the luckiest shop in the country,
yeah.
Which is pretty amazing.
Absolutely. I think the other two are both in the 30s, so we've still got quite a distance between us, which is good.
So what do you think the secret is?
Just lucky. Yeah, just lucky.
Last night's prize is made up of $10 million from Powerball First Division and $1 million from Lotto First Division. Carol Ormerod says they're not sure who sold the winning ticket, but they're all hoping the winner is a local.
Be great for the region and everything, yeah, and hoping most people want it to go to more than one person, but one person's won it this time, and people always say they plan to share it and who they're going to give it to and everything, so it's great.
Lotto says anyone who bought a ticket from Unicum Stortford Lodge in Hastings should write their name on the back of the ticket and check it at any Lotto shop or online. In Hastings for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
Could Anusha Bradley be covering for the fact that she, in fact, is the winner of the $11 million? Food for thought. Let's return to our story about the Secondary Principals Association refusing to endorse tomorrow's climate change protest. This has gotten overwhelming feedback from you guys on this. This from Max in Dunedin. Principals Association against students protesting against climate change on health and safety grounds. Oh, the irony, says Max. It's not climate change itself. Isn't climate change itself the ultimate risk to their and our health and safety? And Pete also says it's quite ironic, saying that, again, that climate change is one of the greatest health and safety concerns of all time. Robin, though, says, who will be supervising children under the age of 14? It is my understanding that in New Zealand, the law states that children under 14 must be supervised. Neil says, we can't guarantee students' safety with runaway climate change either.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Susana Leatawa. Civil Defence is apologising for issuing a false alert about a major earthquake this afternoon and says it's trying to find out what went wrong. Just before 4 o'clock, it sent out a notification to say it was assessing the tsunami risk for New Zealand from a 6.6 quake south of the Kermadec Islands. A few minutes later, however, it deleted the alert, saying it was an old one from a week ago and there was no current event. Civil Defence's Director, Sarah Stewart-Black, told Checkpoint it won't happen again.
I understand that our training site was being used. However, this is a message that got sent out from a former earthquake that occurred, and we're just trying to understand what's gone on in the system, that from a training side of the site, how was it picked up and distributed a message out to the public.
Sarah Stewart-Black of Civil Defence. A 47-year-old man has been charged with attacking the Cabinet Minister and Green Party co-leader James Shaw. He will appear in the Wellington District Court tomorrow, charged with injuring with intent to injure. Mr Shaw suffered a black eye, a bloody nose and facial lacerations when he was attacked in the street on his way to work at Parliament this morning. RNZ understands the assailant jumped out of a van shouting comments aimed at Mr Shaw personally. Describing the attack as horrific, National's Deputy Leader Paula Bennett says that as a politician, she's felt so physically threatened in the past that she's had to call the police.
Probably about 3 occasions come to mind where I felt that I could be physically hurt and have had to call the police and have assistance for it. Look, I think it is exceptional, even though I've just cited 3 other cases. I think it's absolutely horrific. I also never really wanted to go down the path of needing to have police with me or anything permanently either.
Paula Bennett. James Shaw has been under observation in hospital as a precaution. The country's top judge has used her swearing-in ceremony to draw attention to the barriers to getting justice for the poor. Dame Helen Winkelman, who's 56, has replaced Dame Sian Elias, who retired after nearly 20 years as Chief Justice. Speaking before her fellow judges at a special Supreme Court sitting today, Dame Helen said the poor and marginalised are vulnerable to abuse and exploitation and need the law's protection.
Without knowledge of the law, many don't know they have a problem with which the law can help them. The cost of legal representation is so great that it is only the well-to-do who can afford a lawyer to represent them in the court, and that really is a substantial challenge for the profession.
Dame Helen says many of the solutions are beyond the control of judges, but they cannot shy away from dealing with the problems. More than 100 students had to be evacuated from their school in a small Bay of Plenty town this afternoon after armed police responded responded to reports about a man who was possibly armed. The principal of Thornton School, Shelley Bremner, says all the students were at assembly when they got the call from the police to go into lockdown. She says they were taken out the back of the school and over a farmer's paddock. A 23-year-old man is now in police custody. The Deputy Prime Minister has dismissed criticism of Shane Jones for a comment he made about the Serious Fraud Office. During parliamentary discussion about its investigation of National Party donations, Mr Jones said he would study every single step the SFO takes to ensure the investigation is not a whitewash. The National MP Paul Goldsmith says that's an extraordinary thing to say, given the convention that politicians should have no influence on the way law enforcement agencies operate. But Winston Peters says Mr Jones did not overstep the line.
No, he did not. All he said was that we'll be watching this inquiry with great legal acuity, as we watch all inquiries, no more, no less.
The Deputy Prime Minister, Winston Peters. Housing for up to 300 families, including 40 units for vulnerable homeless people, is planned for central Wellington in a partnership between Housing New Zealand and the City Council. The Mayor, Justin Lester, says that subject to public consultation, the new Mount Cook development on part of the old Arlington apartment site will be a mix of high-quality public and affordable housing. He says about 60 people are currently living rough in the central city, and there are 386 on housing waiting lists and 72 in transitional housing. So a development on this scale will make a significant difference. The proposal will be considered at next week's meeting of the Council's City Strategy Committee. Malaysian authorities have refused to drop murder charges against a Vietnamese woman accused of killing the half-brother of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un. An Indonesian woman also accused of the murder was released by the court on Monday. The ABC's Anne Barker reports.
Vietnam this week has lobbied the Malaysian government to free Duan Thi Huong, one of two women originally charged with the 2017 murder of Kim Jong-nam at Kuala Lumpur airport. Vietnam argued it was only fair given her co-accused, Indonesian Siti Aisyah, was released without charge on Monday. But prosecutors say the Malaysian Attorney General has ordered the case to proceed against the Vietnamese woman, but they gave no explanation why. She's now the only suspect in custody over the murder. Four North Korean men suspected of orchestrating the killing fled the airport immediately after.
Anne Barker reporting. It's 6:05. The All Blacks lock Sam Whitelock will make his first appearance for the Crusaders this season on Saturday night, having been named in the starting lineup for the Southern Derby against the Highlanders in Dunedin. He says an extended break has done him the world of good in helping him get over a troublesome groin injury. Meanwhile, New Zealand Rugby says the passion of Fiji's Sevens fans has convinced it to try and take the annual Hamilton event to Fiji. New Zealand has won the rights to host a combined men's and women's World Series tournament for the next 4 years in Hamilton, meaning the Black Ferns Sevens will finally get to play a World Series event at home. But New Zealand Rugby also want to take the tournament to Fiji at some stage between 2020 and 2023, although General Manager Nigel Cass says there are issues to resolve before that can happen.
It's not easy. You've got all the hotels in Fiji and Denarau on one side of the island and the best stadium on the other side of the island, so we've still got some conversations to go.
Nigel Cass. An All Blacks jersey worn by the late Sir Colin Meads has gone up for auction in Britain. The signed jersey was worn by Sir Colin on his last overseas tour with the All Blacks against the Springboks at South Africa's Ellis Park. It's expected to fetch between $11,000 and $15,000. And the National Rugby League competition kicks off tonight with the Melbourne Storm hosting the Brisbane Broncos. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, differences in diet. When the two people with the dieting differences just happen to live together. Can a rabid meat eater and a vegan cohabit without falling out over dinner? This week's overseas correspondent, Motoko Kakubayashi, is on the line from Japan, and our changing world meets the brightest young scientists this side of the Tasman. All on Nights from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, fine spells, isolated afternoon showers. Bay of Plenty and Waikato to Manawatu, including the central high country. A few showers, mainly about the ranges, some heavy and possibly thundery inland today. Gisborne to Wairatapa, also Horowhenua to Wellington. Cloudy periods, a few afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Bulla and Westland, occasional rain in Bulla spreading south late this afternoon. Heavy rain in Westland tomorrow, especially about the ranges. For Nelson and Marlborough, cloudy periods and a few spots of rain. Canterbury and eastern Otago, cloudy with patchy drizzle in North Otago. Occasional rain developing north of Ashburton this evening, spreading south tomorrow, persistent for a time. Fiordland, Southland and the remainder of Otago, long fine spells, however rain late tomorrow in Otago. Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, drizzle returning this evening. It's 6:08 and you're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. And this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. A 47-year-old man will appear in Wellington District Court tomorrow in relation to an attack on Green Party co-leader James Shaw. Mr Shaw was on his way to work in Wellington this morning when a man is said to have jumped from a van, calling him by name before physically assaulting him. The Climate Change Minister, who has bruising and lacerations to his face, spent much of the day in hospital under observation, but is now at home. His co-leader, Marama Davidson, has just spoken to him and joins us now. Hi Marama, how is he doing?
Kia ora, Lisa. Look, he's good. Bit shaken, like we all are, but has been checked out and the focus is getting him rested.
So what are the extent of his injuries and what happened?
So what I know is that he was grabbed, he was punched in the face, and then two passerbys were able to help him. He gave a police report. He was checked out, firstly by an emergency ambulance, later on by the hospital. He's been okayed to go home and rest, but you know this is not New Zealand life. So understandably, we're all a little shocked.
With the greatest respect to James Shaw, was there an indication that this person knew who he was?
Yes, so I can confirm that his name was called out by this person. So he was personally identified. All the other details I can't confirm. They're a bit sketchy, and of course there's a police investigation. So I'm also not going to sort of guess and speculate on that at the moment.
So James Shaw, though, has told you that someone called his name out before this happened, shortly before this happened.
Yes, that's as much as we can confirm. He was identified. His name was called out, and that's the extent of what I can actually confirm and put out at the moment.
Was it a single punch? Do you know before people intervened?
I apologise. I wasn't with him at the time of making the police report, so I don't know the exact details. But he was hit in the face, and he was grabbed.
You said there this is not our way. How concerned are you about safety of MPs after this?
Yeah, I mean, I really value that we can walk around and people can come and talk to us and we can go to any public places where it's mostly been safe for us. So we don't want that to change, and I really value that part of people being able to access us in this way. Security has always been cautious, and the security at Parliament has always done a really good job, and we don't want to lose that freedom of getting around the place and people having a chat, people who we don't know, and so we'll carry on. At this point, this is a single individual event that isn't connected to anything else.
But I understand people don't want to have their freedoms restricted, but at the same time, are we being a little bit naive about the fact that we think some of our most high-profile people, who are often involved in making controversial decisions, can just walk around like everyday people with no concerns?
No, I think that's a real value of the way New Zealand does politics, actually, Lisa, and I know that James also values that access. Look, this is one attack. It's really too early to speculate on exactly how deep and wide this goes. And we're going to carry on doing the work that we have to do. I'll be out at the Climate Change March tomorrow in Wellington with lots more ordinary public people and children. And we have to protect that and we have to hold on to that. That is an important part of our democracy. And of course, we'll be careful as well.
You mentioned the march. Is there any suggestion that the assault and the march is connected in any way?
Nothing yet, Lisa. Just that James was personally identified, and all other details are unconfirmed and unclear at this stage.
Is the Green Party reviewing security for its MPs?
Yes, of course, security has been in touch across the board, not just with the Green Party, and feelings of safety are just as important. So security have made sure that they're offering support and assistance if we want to get anywhere and need their assistance. So, that's
So at the march, sorry to interrupt, Marama, you said you're going to the march tomorrow as planned.
Yep.
Will you have security with you tomorrow?
Listen, Lisa, I see no need to be worried about the public being able to approach me personally. I personally see no need to change the normal cautions that we take, the normal precautions. Again, at this stage, this is an individual attack.
So you're doing nothing extra around security tomorrow. It's business as usual for you when you go out on this march.
I mean, I think that's probably not true. I think that security will, of course, be a lot more aware, and we'll take the normal caution that we always take. But again, we want to keep things in perspective here. This is one person, and we don't want to rush to changing systems at this point.
So how often do you get threats?
Oh, goodness, I mean, I've spoken about this quite a bit. It's an ordinary part of the job, Lisa. And not just, especially
but how
for women,
how frequent are they, and what of what nature?
Oh, the online social media trolling is for people like myself. I know Galway's actually women in general can be quite sustained. That can be quite ordinary. Every now and then, there's a little bit of an alarming, quite violent message that can come through. That's something that I don't think is new, to be honest.
Have you ever felt physically threatened as an MP?
Oh, some people can be passionate in public when they're talking to you, when they've been through some hard stuff, and, they can be a bit passionate. But that's part of the job, is just being able to listen and receive people where they're at as well.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is Marama Davidson, who is the co-leader of the Greens. Her co-leader, James Shaw, is resting at home after he was assaulted this morning. He was punched and he is recuperating. Marama will be on that march tomorrow, she says, regardless. High-profile GP Lance O'Sullivan has renewed calls for compulsory vaccinations, saying parents who don't comply should pay more tax or have their benefits docked. More on that shortly, but at December last year, only 88% of 5-year-olds were fully immunised. The Ministry of Health is aiming for 95%, although Labor scrapped official immunisation targets. The West Coast has the lowest vaccination rate at just over 70%. It's about 78% in the Bay of Plenty and just 83% in Northland. So why are some areas not vaccinating as much as others? Our reporter Lois Williams spoke to parents in Whangarei about their view on immunisation.
I do believe there's personal choice, but that personal choice does affect people that don't have the immunity, as well as I know quite a few young babies too early to be vaccinated, and that concerns me. It's a worry that those parents shouldn't have to worry about that going to the supermarket or places like that.
I've been vaccinated twice because when they gave me my first vaccination and they tested me, I had no immunity, so they had to give me another one because I was pregnant at the time.
Okay. How long ago was that?
34 years ago.
Yeah. So your girl has been vaccinated?
Yep.
How old are you?
23.
What do you think of people who don't vaccinate their children?
Yeah, they're putting other people at risk too, and other children, and I think they should be vaccinated, especially if they're in the community like childcare, schools.
Are your children vaccinated?
No.
Grandchildren, your mockers. Do you want to get them vaccinated?
No.
Why is that?
Because we looked hard into that when they were born, and that was the decision we took.
Not to vaccinate?
Not to vaccinate.
So will you be taking any particular measures to protect them if there's an outbreak up here?
So if we know there's an outbreak out here, if she was in a place that had the outbreak, would we take her there? No. Yes. So we would take measures, yeah.
Dr. Lance O'Sullivan has a different view. He says that successive governments have been too timid in reaching immunisation targets, and we need to bring in compulsory vaccination with penalties for those who refuse to comply. Now, he's already floated this idea of penalising people who don't vaccinate their children with benefit cuts. But what about those people who aren't on a benefit?
If you're not on a benefit, but you have you've made a decision not to immunise your children, and we can calculate that the cost to country for every vaccine preventable condition and illness should be covered by people that don't vaccinate themselves or their family, then there's probably even a solution there. I'm not a tax expert, but I think we have to use every lever at our disposal to ensure that we have people following science and the best practice and to protect everyone.
So, in essence, fine people?
Well, look, we fine people for other things that are even probably more trivial, that have less impact for harm and even death.
Like what? What's the comparison that you're thinking of?
Well, obviously a seatbelt law. I mean, we wear seatbelts 100% of the time in the very unlikely event that it'll ever save our lives. The protection offered by immunisation is far greater, and yet we don't make it compulsory. We don't have boundaries around enforcing it.
OK, so that's a punishment. What about a sweetener? What do you reckon about offering a sweetener or a cash bonus for bringing your kids in to be immunised? Doesn't have to be a punishment, does it?
Well, I don't know if we should talk of it through like as a punishment or a cash bonus or a reward thing. This is about, people making sensible decisions based on evidence, and at the end of the day, an incentive for people to immunise their child is to protect their child and that of and other people in the community. If we start incentivising every little thing that a decent citizen should do, I think we're going down the wrong track.
But that incentive already exists, and we are not hitting the immunisation rates that we want. So the incentive to keep your child healthy and keep other people healthy and keep the so-called herd healthy, that already exists, and we are not meeting our targets. So
that's right. So we need to be more prescriptive, and this comes back to what is being said by others more than just me, is that okay, in this situation, how do we guarantee that we're going to get the numbers, the percentage of population that we need to be immunised to protect everyone? We make it a compulsion. We make it a compulsory act, and this is a discussion that needs to be had. We're going to have this discussion time and time again every time there's an epidemic. I mean, I don't know of any other solution other than trying to educate people, but that's not happening, and then actually quite the opposite. We've seen a reverse in immunisation rates because of this very vocal and strong anti-immunisation lobby.
Yeah, because some people would regard compulsion as very nanny state, obviously.
Yeah, and I mean, that's always, a comment that gets made, but I mean, at the end of the day, we have some rules around how we live in society to protect everyone, and this is a sensible move, is to ensure that we have a majority, the most we can immunise, most children and people we can immunise. If people think that creating a society that's caring and safe is nanny state, then so be it, but it's a society that cares and keeps people safe. What we do know, with this worrying decrease in immunisations that is occurring through this misinformation machine, we are going to see children die from vaccine-preventable diseases.
How confident are you, though, that the immunisation rate and the lack of it is tied to the anti-vax message? How much is ignorance or apathy versus the anti-vax message?
Well, look, in 1993, 1995, I think, Andrew Wakefield, the disgraced clinician from the UK, suggested there's a link between MMR and autism. In the last 2 to 3 decades, what we've seen is a 30% increase in measles and a reduction in people wanting MMR vaccination. So we know that misinformation, this is discredited has actually caused children to die. So we know that that's clear. What other drivers like apathy? Absolutely. I mean, when I lived in Kaitaia, I had a woman who wouldn't immunise her children. There wasn't a deep philosophical opposition to immunisations. It was, to be honest, she couldn't be bothered. Now, if we had said to her, well, your benefit will be reduced by this amount because you're choosing not to immunise your child, I can guarantee you she would have immunised your child.
What role does poverty play? Because if you look at the statistics on the Ministry's website, areas where there are lower incomes tend to have lower rates of vaccinations. Yeah, and so how worrying is that? I mean, that the most vulnerable, those that are living in homes that are unhealthy, those that are probably, born premature or live in smokers, and nutrition is an issue, are the least protected. That is such a worry, and that's why I rage against people coming into communities like Kaitaia and encouraging my community not to immunise their children. The reason why... But hang on a minute, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Lance, but what you are suggesting is punitive measures to make sure people get vaccinated. So you're talking about docking benefits and taking money away. You're just exacerbating the problem, aren't you, by doing that? Okay, so the same argument, Lisa, was held for increasing taxes on smokes, on cigarettes. The poverty, if people in poverty smoke more, so if you put the cost of cigarettes up, you're going to create more poverty in those homes. Now, to be frank, that is not a situation we should find ourselves in, where we're not doing the right things because, of thinking we're going to make the situation worse. We actually are making it worse because when a pregnant mother is smoking and has a premature baby, that's going to cost her and the country far, far more than what we were trying to do by increasing taxes on her cigarettes. Just before we go, Lance, are you fully immunised? Because people born after 1969 and before 1990 need to check, don't they? So do you know if you're fully up to date? Look, so I probably have not got my full protection against measles, and someone asked me this morning. There's a limited number of booster vaccines available, and I know that those should go to the most vulnerable and those that were most likely going to have serious complications of coming across the measles. A parent's decision to vaccinate their children is a personal choice, but it's one that divides communities. And with the measles outbreak in Canterbury now spreading to Dunedin, along with separate cases in Auckland, the issue is now causing debate around the country. Here's our Northland reporter Lois Williams again, and she's speaking to the parents of a baby girl who is still too young to be immunised.
We are vaccinated, and my sister who lives with us is vaccinated.
We've all made sure that we've all had two. And any contact with, because we've got a wedding this weekend, there are actually people coming from Christchurch. I have made the decision to ask them to make sure that they're all vaccinated as well, and we've just decided that it's a bit of a risk to hand her to other people willy-nilly at the moment because
it's real. It's scary. We don't want to put her in the firing line, so we're her main line of defence, and if means people can't touch her, hold her, that's what it has to be, because we don't want to risk her health just because people want to hold her because she's a baby.
So you'll be asking people at this wedding whether or not they've been vaccinated?
Yeah, my partner has already started that process, so yeah, and the response has been pretty good, hasn't it?
So far.
Yeah.
I do know a couple of people that are very firm anti-vaxxers that are coming to the wedding.
So they won't be getting anywhere near your
No. She was premature as well, so I feel like that makes her a bit more vulnerable for any infection, even if it's a cold. I don't really want her getting sick at all.
No. Yeah. Very good.
Even myself, I was on the fence when we found out we were pregnant, but because of how premature she was, I decided to get off the fence, get off the high horse and protect my child.
So you've been a bit anti-vax before then?
Yeah, just from the negative reviews and everything that people have been saying online, and even though it's been confirmed that vaccinations don't lead to autism, a lot of people still look down on us because we've vaccinated her, because we put her first, opposed to, we don't want to spread anything else that could potentially be another epidemic or another outbreak.
Can I ask what changed your mind about vaccination?
She was 6 weeks early, so she needed as much immune system and as much protection as she needed to, being that young. And I mean, to be honest, that's the only thing that turned me around.
Were you advised to get vaccinated?
Well, I kind of changed in my mind, but ultimately I really pulled my head in for my child. There wasn't nothing on my beliefs or anything. I'd rather have my child have a healthy start to life opposed to being in and out of hospital with risks of infections and diseases, etc., etc.
And that was Lois Williams speaking to a young family in Whangarei about the choice to immunise or not. And let's go to some of your feedback now on the Climate Change March, which is happening tomorrow. It's attracted a lot of attention and a lot of feedback. This one from David, who says, "It seems to me the principals are more concerned about themselves and their own attitudes and beliefs. They can't guarantee to keep students safe, and isn't that the reason for the kids protesting in the first place?" That is, the Secondary Principals Association is refusing to endorse the march tomorrow. And this one from Tony. Tony says, "My suggestion was that a sports day or similar could be organised for that day. That way, no class time would be missed." And Tony says it would have also tested the resolve of the protesters. Sports day or a march, a true test perhaps of their convictions. Hey, thank you so much for all your feedback this evening. That is Checkpoint for tonight. Whether you were listening to us on radio, television or online, or however you chose to tune in to us today, you can catch up on our stories. They'll be on rnz.co.nz/checkpoint, or you can check our Facebook page because it's working again now. And for all the latest news and information and stories from all around the country, you can go to our rnz.co.nz homepage. But from me and the rest of the team, that's it for tonight.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A 47-year-old man has been charged with this morning's attack on Cabinet Minister and Green Party co-leader James Shaw. More than 100 students had to be evacuated from their school in a small bay of Plentytown this afternoon after armed police responded to reports about a man who was possibly armed. Civil Defence is apologising for issuing a false alert about a major earthquake today and says it's trying to find out what went wrong. The country's top judge has used her swearing-in ceremony to draw attention to the barriers to getting justice for the poor. And the Secondary Principals Association is refusing to endorse tomorrow's student-led climate change strike, saying students who attend will be marked as truant. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7.
RNZ National with live coverage from the WOMAD Festival of Music, Arts and Dance in New Plymouth all weekend.